Hello, my name is Brian Lewis, and I am an instructor at JTNS in the Public Works Division. Today, we're going to talk about winter hazards, walking and driving precautions, and maybe some other things we need to do as far as what we need to do when it's cold outside and we need to protect ourselves from hypothermia and from frostbite. But before we get started, I'd like for you to pause the video and talk about any near misses and accidents you may have had, how to resolve them so no one gets hurt in the future, and then simply, when you're finished, press play and we'll begin again. Hopefully, you've pressed pause, had a good discussion, resolved any issues you had, and now we'll get into winter hazards, walking and driving precautions. So as we talk about winter hazards, we're going to talk mainly about walking and driving, which has to do with traction and those sort of things that we need to do to keep ourselves at work and at home safe during these winter months. We have conditions that are less than optimal, and our actions mean something. Our actions absolutely mean something when we want to reduce risk. But before we get into that, I do want to bring up cold, ice, wind, snow, all the things that we encounter in the winter can be a real problematic when it comes to hypothermia and frostbite and those sort of things. So hypothermia happens when your body is internal body temperature goes to 95 degrees or below. Most of us have an internal body temperature around 98.6. So you can actually get into hypothermia as high as 41 degrees Fahrenheit. So our body starts shivering. That's our body's way of telling us that we're getting around 95 degrees. We want to stay warm. We want to keep that internal body temperature up. Now, when we talk about frostbite and trench foot and things like that, we're talking about blisters. We're talking about frozen fingers and toes and hands. The important thing to remember is that if your fingers become frozen, you want to thaw them slowly. So we want to use water around 100 or 101 degrees Fahrenheit to do that. We want to gradually thaw those fingers and toes and limbs. Um, as you may remember, we talked about how sweat captured in a t-shirt is 25 times more efficient at keeping your body temperature in check in the summertime and can keep us from going into heat exhaustion and heat stress, heat stroke. It works against us in the winter. So we want to do our best to keep our clothes, our gloves, our shoes, feet, hands dry. We don't want to have that kind of problem, right? So that makes sense, I think. Please remember, gradually thaw your fingers and toes. Do not rub them together, as will be a natural reaction when they go numb and have tingling, pins and needle type feeling. When we talk about walking, we want to be reasonable with the conditions outside. We want to think clearly about what can be accomplished and have the right shoes and clothes on. So, as I was speaking about hypothermia and frostbite and frozen fingers and toes, that all comes into account when we talk about clothes, dressing in layers, so that we can add to the layers or subtract from the layers so that we can regulate our body temperature so we don't sweat excessively and get wet. Also, we want to use clothes that prevent wet um, from getting, or the snow and the ice and rain from getting into us and our bodies. That's a big deal. We want to make sure we stay as dry as possible. Now, when we talk about proper footwear, we want to make sure we keep our center of balance over our shoulders. We want to make sure that we take small steps, use the tread on our shoes as we would want to keep us from slipping. We want to anticipate and look ahead at what's going on look out for vehicles. So next month we'll discuss excavator and backhoe safety. And a lot of times there are situations where we can't use engineering substitution controls, things like that. So we have to be aware of everything around us, and we need to look for hazards that can hurt us. So we will be careful with that. Please look for vehicles. Please look for vehicles. Now, when we start talking about some other things as far as looking for vehicles, we want to use our eyes and ears to see what's going on around us. We also want to anticipate snow that has been thawed and then it freezes again as ice, anticipate shady spots from trees and such when we're walking down the sidewalks or down our sidewalk, driveway. We want to walk intentionally. We want to be careful when we enter buildings. I talked, or actually, there was a slide that talked about being reasonable a few moments ago. A lot of people have cardiac events when they're not reasonable about the work that can be done, and being able to take rest breaks, overexertion, strained muscles, sprained ligaments, and things like that. So be reasonable. Don't get yourself into a cardiac type event. So when we talk about driving hazards, there again, we want to make sure we have the proper traction. We will make sure we drive and not get in a hurry. We want to do these things both for our protection as well as those people that are driving around us, or maybe pedestrians also. We want to be careful, make sure we don't hurt anyone, that sort of thing. And so please be aware of that and be careful. We will also talk about some common sense kind of things that we can do for ourselves and maybe for our family members. So when we talk about these things, we're going to talk about being prepared. We're going to talk about protecting ourselves and others and what we can do to prevent those kinds of events from happening, right? So, like the slide shows, winter brings a lot of unsafe conditions, driving conditions, and we want to be careful. We want to use our common sense, and we want to think about what we're doing and how we're going to do it. It's always good to have a plan. If you don't have a plan, you're going to end up in trouble, and we want to avoid that as much as possible. So please keep that in mind. So, as we get ready to go into the next slide, we're going to talk about preparing ourselves for these conditions, protecting ourselves from these conditions, and preventing accidents. We want to maintain our vehicles, both the work vehicles and our personal vehicles. And we want to make sure the batteries are in good shape. We want to make sure that the extreme cold does not cause our batteries to die on us. We want to make sure we have adequate traction with our tire tread, whether you use a gauge or a penny in Lincoln's Head to measure the tread on your tires. It's important. We don't want slick vehicles, slick tires make for ill handling vehicles. Make sure we can see by having good windshield wipers. Make sure we have no freeze fluid in the washer reservoir. And of course, we want to be able to maintain our antifreeze in our vehicles, both work as well as personal. We don't want to be stuck somewhere due to an overheating vehicle. So we need to take those things into consideration and be prepared for what may ever happen, right? We want to plan our routes, allow extra time if we have bad weather conditions or bad visibility. We want to make sure, just like we don't want to overexert ourselves and experience hypothermia or a cardiac event when we're walking or outside on foot. We want to make sure we don't do those things if a vehicle gets stalled or stuck. A lot of things can happen, including having vehicles roll over on people. We want to make sure we have some way to bring attention to ourselves if we're in a bad spot and we're stalled or stuck. A good thing to have is a fully charged cell phone, as well as any lights or antenna markers or flags that can um, bring your attention of your situation to other people. Make sure the exhaust is clear of snow. This is important to do for our family members, making sure that the exhaust is in good shape. We don't want people to experience carbon monoxide poisoning. It is very deadly. We'll make sure we do that and make sure for ourselves and everyone else. We want to buckle up. We will make our passengers buckle up. Traction control. If you have a newer car that has traction control, that's great. If you do not, then what we want to do is have traction control with our right foot. Easy on the gas, easy on the brake, and make sure we do things correctly. We also want to use child safety seats correctly, and we want to make sure that the most vulnerable among us are in good shape and safely secured, so that if there's some kind of accident, that they are not at a severe risk, right? So along those lines, we want to slow down. We want to increase the buffer zone between us and other vehicles. Just as if you're a pedestrian, you want to look out for vehicles. When you're operating a vehicle, you want to look out for pedestrians. We have to do this because it's important when we don't have engineering controls available to us that we be aware of the world around us and use our senses to make sure that we don't have some kind of accident. We want to get plenty of rest and don't like to preach to anyone, but I do think it's important that during the holidays people celebrate. Some people are depressed, but people drink. And if you're going to drink, just please be an adult and don't get behind the wheel and put other people at risk. That's really not a good situation for anyone. And we need to be honest with ourselves and reasonable about those sort of things. Something we don't mention very often, but you'll notice from most, if not all, of our presentations is that 98% of all accidents are due to unsafe conditions and or unsafe acts. In the wintertime, it's very difficult to control the conditions. The weather is going to be what the weather is going to be, and there's very little we can do about that. But how we act, how we prepare ourselves, how we plan for what we're doing, how we maintain our vehicles, the shoes that we wear, and how we walk, taking short steps, keeping our center of balance in between our shoulders, goes a long way to reduce slips, trips, and falls, which are 15% of all recordable accidents, and also goes a long way to keeping both our work and our personal vehicles running, right? I appreciate your time in this presentation. If you have any questions or anything you would like to bring up to your JTNS instructor, please do so. We will try to answer any question that you have. We may not know the answer right away, but what we will do if we don't know the answer is look it up and try and get back with you and let you know what we hear and or what we found out. And so please make use of that resource. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day. And since this is the last presentation before Christmas, please have a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. Thank you.